One of the best things Big Four type companies do is like they invest heavily on training. Both the companies I work for had their own massive training facility. It is to a level like a hotel slash resort. You need to be a thought leader. But there's two sides to this equation. You need to define the what, and then you need to figure out how to do that. Right? In a more additional sense, what part had already been decided by someone what we are trying to do. And if from software development point of view, you come into picture to figure out like the how part.
Welcome to another episode of our Tech Chronicles. It's episode 26. Today, we are going to talk about consulting life with Big Four. To discuss this, I can't think of anyone better than our own Yuresh De Silva, who has over 25 years of experience as a technology leader, having worked with a number of top-tier consulting firms. And now he has his own successful consulting firm. He has worked with many Fortune 500 companies around the globe across consumer, telecom, automotive, finance, and many more. Talking about around the globe, Yuresh, remind me, how many countries have you traveled to?
55 under the belt now.
55. My God, that's a dream
Smart.
for me. That's a dream for me. But if you're someone who's looking to do what you love while traveling, 55 might be a stretch. Get broad exposure working for top tier consulting firms and make the big bucks. This episode might just be the one. I would listen twice, but to what Yuresh has to say. So today, Yuresh, we are going to jog back your memory to the first days in consulting, right? To leading major transformation projects and how you adapt to the rise of AI, right? So let's dive into what Yuresh has to say about lifelong in consulting, highs, challenges, and where we are all heading. But before we get started, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yuresh, you used to rent a swanky apartment in downtown Chicago for a long time. And the story is that you probably spend more time in airlines than at your apartment. And the rumor is that it was an expensive storage for your shoes. True or false?
For my shoes,
Yes,
false.
false.
But to your point, couple of years I did spend over 300 days of the year at a different place, basically. Not at my apartment. So yeah, it was an expensive apartment to maintain from that sense.
Yeah, that's fun stories. All right, so let's jump in. Let's get started with your leap into consulting, like the day one and like the first few months of experience. So, what really drove you into a career in consulting? Was it planned or was it accidental?
So short answer is like it's a bit of a mix of the two. But let me kind of go back to before that little bit to give some context, right? So I started my career working for a offshore outfit of like a consulting company, right? As many of us did. So this was Virtusa in Sri Lanka. When I started kind of doing client facing, and different companies have different terminology for this, I acted as one of the landed resources, which what it means is basically you're working for an offshore company and you go on site, quote unquote, right? Like to be with the onshore team and kind of get into more client facing. So my career kind of started with that type of setup. So I was kind of used to that idea. Within while I was working on that space, I kind of fell in love with like that mode of working, right? Especially around the client facing part was more exciting to me because you also get to figure out the what versus just the how on around the work you do. So yeah, so that kind of led me to seek more consulting type of work. It was kind of like a deliberate type of a move when I joined one of the big fours when I did.
That's cool. So, you already had some experience by the time you joined the Big Four. What was it like? Like, you went from a relatively small outfit to a big top consulting firm. Like, what was it like? Was it like mind blowing? Did you experience something that you didn't expect? Were there any misconceptions that kind of corrected you, right? What was it like?
Yeah, I mean all of it, right? Like for about like a few years before I joined my first big four, I should say I worked for a company with about like 500 people. It was a Chicago-based company. It wasn't necessarily a startup, but it had like a very relaxed culture, very startup type of feel. Like you went beyond like the normal, you have these pool tables, foosball tables, bean bags, beer in the fridge, that type of setup. And once I left that company and joined a big four, it was kind of like a hybrid setup for me because around that time, this is like around 2014 time, digital transformation kind of was becoming like a huge deal, right? A lot of companies were getting into this quote unquote digital focus area. So most of the big fours at the time had their own digital organization or the group, like a subgroup, right? So I joined that. So because of that, like the shock wasn't too much or too big, I would say, because traditional consulting versus digital consulting had a very different feel to it, right? Like so it was like a more relaxed culture. Some people dressed up, some were very casual. Like I used to wear hoodies sometimes to client meetings. It wasn't necessarily frowned upon, but it depends on the client too. Like sometimes you have to dress up depending on the client. But the point I'm trying to make is that it was kind of like a hybrid culture. But there were definitely like a lot of new things that I had to learn, lot of things that I didn't really expect, and we can explore a little bit of that. But just kind of wanted to cover that top question first.
But no beer.
There will be too. Like actually, there used to be happy hours. One of the companies I worked for, they had like this special floor, which was like an upscale cigar lounge type of like a floor. So it was designed to kind of entertain clients or like have executive meetings or just to celebrate something or just a 5 p.m. on a weekday, whatever it is. Yeah, beer included.
All right. I don't see if there's anything to complain there. That's a good uplift. So talking about, you said something about you needed to learn new things. Being a big company, I would think they have really good structured mentorship programs. Like, is that true? Like, did
Yeah.
did they make it easy for you to get onboarded?
Yes. So, I mean, resources wise, there were like unlimited resources, right? There were like a ton of online learning and development type of training material, onboarding material, and also there were quite significant amount of access to certifications too. So you can do certifications, and if you exceed like a certain mark, like 100% was reimbursed basically, right? I think on top of all of that, one of the best things I would say that these big four type companies do is like they invest heavily on training. Both the companies I work for had their own, they call it a university, but it is basically like this massive training facility in some city, right? It is to a level like a hotel slash resort type of a place. One side of the wing is like your accommodation. It looks exactly like a hotel, and some of them are actually run by like a hotel chain from a hospitality point of view. The other side of the wing is basically like your various rooms, conference rooms, or training rooms and auditoriums and whatnot with like really high tech stuff, right? So typically, even the onboarding happens at this facility. It's kind of a 3 day, 5 day type of program. You kind of get to know everything about the company, what type of things they do, how they do things to do, things not to do. All that stuff is kind of done at this facility. So resources wise, there's a tremendous amount of resources that's built around this.
Yeah, I think that makes tons of sense, right? Because if you're a consulting firm, you are being sent to some other organization to advise how to run their business, and you have to be the smartest person in the room. And also, I guess their goal is like, they have to make you billable as soon as possible to, recoup their money. So with that, my next question kind of pivoting into the life of a project with a big consulting firm. Like, can you walk us through like what is the typical consulting project life cycle is like?
I don't think there's necessarily like one template for it, one direct answer to it either. So there's obviously, with just like with any software development company, there's multiple types of projects, right? There are more short-term discovery type of engagements, strategy engagements, and implementation engagements too, right? So pretty much every project would have like a common team structure to a great extent. I would say it is very hierarchical, like a pyramid type of like a structure. It's not flat, and there are like some hard rules. I mean, when I say hard rules, like they strictly adhere to it, from a billable point of view. So you would have partner or partners at the top, and then you would have like a senior manager type person who's kind of running the entire show, like the program or project manager. And then you have like your next year and like your next year. So it's very hierarchical. So most teams are structured that way, and how wide it gets depends on like the scope of the project, right? When I say like the from a headcount point of view. And when it comes to, I think we had to take like a couple of examples, like a discovery type of like a project typically runs for, I would say like within 3 months, right? 2 to 3 months. Sometimes it's even like 6 weeks. Very rarely you see that. Like typically it's like about 8 weeks, and 8 to 12 weeks, right? And this mostly applies to pre-COVID days. So typically once like the project starts, basically you're on a flight pretty much every week.
Because you have to
They
travel
use
to the client site and back,
correct
back and forth,
exactly.
back and forth.
Exactly. So it used to be called like the 3-4-5 model. So what that means is 3 nights, 4 days you are away, and fifth day you are back in your home office, basically.
So has it changed now?
It has changed significantly. There are still some who does it. See, the thing is, before COVID, like I think from both sides, everyone were convinced that this is the only way that we could do work. You have to meet in person. You have to be there in person, because some of the tools that we use today were not that advanced either, right? Like there
Right,
weren't
right.
like a lot of collaboration type of tools before COVID. Some of the I mean, there were, but like some of the very advanced type of tools that we use, things like Miro, for example, were not like a big thing before COVID, right? Like
Right.
so, people were more used to meeting in person, going to a meeting room, war rooms, whiteboarding, post-its all over,
Yeah.
right? That type of setup. So because of that, like I mean, I used to pretty much fly out every Monday morning and fly back Thursday evening. And in some, I mean, we can go to the travel aspects a little bit later, but sometimes you're not required to necessarily fly back to your home office. Like you are given the option to either stay back instead of flying back. So like the company covers the cost for the hotels over the weekend, because it's the same amount as if you're flying back. Or like you can even go to like a different city if you want, as long as like the flight costs are the same. So there's like a lot of flexibility around it. But like the tradition used to be like you fly out, then kind of have all these like conversations with the client face to face, various types of.
So discovery projects is like 3 months.
Yeah, discovery is usually about 3 months.
So what are the other type of projects?
Yeah, like the implementation type of projects are longer. Like I would say they would scale anywhere from like 3 to 6 to 1 year, or even beyond that. And the implementation projects have like a different dynamic. There's a lot of offshore or nearshore involvement that happens to kind of maintain the cost. Because keep in mind, like yes, like the travel is built on top of like your project cost, but at the same time, the on-site resource like the rate cards are like pretty high, right? So you cannot necessarily pack like a whole team that's required for an implementation project purely from an on-site point of view, for from 2 points of view. One is from the cost itself, and the other one is like it's sometimes like you cannot just like staff that many people on shore. You have more access to resources offshore. Some of these companies I work for, they still do like have like a lot of nearshore operations too, right? Either somewhere Central America, South America, Europe, mostly around like Eastern Europe. So you're not necessarily always dependent on offshore, which is typically Far East or like East.
So Yuresh, I'm curious, like, so you've done implementation, through some of these big four companies, as well as you've done implementation with with Virtusa, which is a smaller firm.
Mhm.
Was there a difference in how you operated?
Yes and no. I mean, so one of the things and this is not necessarily done like very consistently. So you have access to like a lot of accelerators, right? And from the smallest thing to like a big software component level, right? When I started, even when you create PowerPoints or whatever, you have all these like additional macros and add-ons that you can use to do a lot of things that on top of like what PowerPoint already has or whatever, right? So there has been like a lot of investment that has happened to kind of get these tools ready to accelerate things, right? You have a lot of templates. Like if you want to start something, you're not necessarily starting with a blank sheet of paper, right? And it goes across like various things, like let's say like a onboarding checklist, onboarding like a presentation, deliverable presentation. I'm just talking a couple of things around like PowerPoint, right? Project management tools, various tools. So when it comes to software products, sometimes like you have like these lift and shift type of like accelerators, and it also depends on like how many times you have done it before, because that is kind of also used as like a marketing sales tool to say that like, hey, we have done this, we have this. So it's not like we are starting greenfield. But having said that, there's like a lot of things that a smaller company has, you still have it, right? Like, because I mean, we all know this, like certain aspects of software development has really not changed over the last 20 plus years, right? Like
That's true.
the issues that you run into on a daily basis, like there's like a lot of headache around things. So there's it's not avoidable, like, but there's some synergies, some differences
Yeah.
is how I saw it.
Yeah, I can speak to my PowerPoint experience. I had an engagement with McKinsey, and I have to say those were the best PowerPoint slides I have seen.
Yeah.
They were really good. Like,
So it's funny you brought this up. Like, so especially with RFPs, I one of the big differences I saw, like when you respond to like a RFP. So remember, like when I started this conversation, I talked about like the whole digital arm of these companies. So one of the big fours I worked for, within the digital organization, they had this concept of like a studio, right? So this is like a creative studio, like, so these are creative designers, and because they had like they were doing like a lot of advertising type of work too, like, so there were like a lot of acquisitions around like some big advertising companies at the time. But there was this whole group of people, all they do is like do creative work, right? So sometimes like a project team would basically the RFP, work on the RFP, and then on top of like your deliverable. So when you deliver the RFP, there are a bunch of documents that you create, right? And there's also like a readout. So typically you have like a more condensed version of like a PowerPoint presentation. So these deliverables, like once the project team kind of is done with that, it is handed over to like a studio team to kind of really make it pretty, right?
yeah,
So they go through like every minor detail you can think of, to like from a alignment of a period to like your bullet points and themes and whatever. Sometimes I have seen like some documents that I have produced don't look like what I
it doesn't
produced at
like
all.
yours.
Content is the same, but like it looks like completely different, right?
Yeah.
But it looks amazing.
So they
Like
bring in
if
the
I can do that
branding, the sales
way that
pitch.
I have
Yeah.
done it, right? So yeah, I mean, like I said, like the amount of resources that's available to do these things are like tremendous.
I think another aspect might be, I think you mentioned this in one of our casual conversations. If you're working for a tech consultancy firm, like you're mostly exposed to like tech implementations. But if you're working for Big Four, because they get the business side of things also. So you get to really work end to end, like solve the business problem. And part of that, you also solving the digital side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I didn't really realize like the whole partner concept before I joined like a big four. Haven't really paid much attention. Even like I didn't really know about it until after I joined. Some of these partners at big fours are like they are the ones who actually define the industries.
Right.
Like I didn't really think of it like that. They are like trendsetters, right? Like they define strategies that some one company might adopt, and like then like subsequently there'll be a trail of companies who will adopt that company, right? And we have seen this. We always think that it's that company that came up with that idea, but in most cases it's a consulting company that came up with that idea, right? And it becomes like the bread and butter of that company, and then everyone follows that company as a blueprint. So a lot of these ideas come from these partners who have a tremendous amount of experience within that industry, because it's a very verticalized format, right? Some of them only. So if there's like a set of partners who focus on retail, they only work on retail. They don't even look at like any other industry, right? Like that is like what they breathe day in day out. Like, so there's a lot like you can learn from those. But yeah, that it's pretty amazing, like how it kind of all connects, how it gets into like these businesses, how it runs the economy. Everything kind of
Yeah.
revolves around.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, you also get, more pressure to deliver higher quality, right? This expectation is much more higher. How do you level up? How do you keep up?
It kind of depends on from person to person. So one other thing like you need to keep in mind is that the your colleagues, most of them are like type A personalities, right? So there's, I would necessarily say like all of them, but like there's there's a significant amount, because they either come from like an Ivy League type of like an education background, or they come from like a different consulting company. And also personality wise, like there can be like a lot of friction. And also on top, like you have like these crazy deadlines, right? Like especially when you travel, sometimes like you are up till very late, like every night. So you need to kind of find various balances. We have kind of covered this as a different podcast topic too. I don't think there's like one formula for it, honestly, in my opinion. Like you have to find out what works for you. But nevertheless, like I think everyone should find that balance, right? Because you do get burnt out eventually if you don't. And there's a lot of support that's given from these companies too. So there's some good type of PTO plans. And like I said, even when you're traveling, there's a lot of flexibility. You don't need to. And again, for someone with a family, this is not necessarily quite possible to do every week, but they don't need to go back like to their home office or the home, basically, right? They can go somewhere else if they want. Flights are covered or whatever. Like, so you have to kind of like find the balance. I mean, pressure is there definitely, because some of these deadlines are like super crazy. Always like, you start off like really cool thinking that everything is kind of working towards your goal, and suddenly you realize like you are behind, right?
Yep.
That's why I said like some of those elements are applicable to like big fours for sure.
All right, let's switch the topics a little bit to something more recent and more relevant. Like everyone has access to Gen AI. Like before Gen AI, like I think Gen AI kind of compete with the consultants in a way. Like, what do you think the future is going to be? Like we have Gen AI, now we have reasoning AI. It's going to keep getting more and more advanced. Like, what do you think the role of a consultant going to be in the context of, Gen AI?
Yeah. My thought around this is it's still going to be something that is complementary to your day to day work. It could change, it could very well change, but I don't think it's necessarily going to change over the next 5 years. Now, caveat to what I just said, right? I think the balance is going to change from a lot of manual work to automating your work. I think that balance is going to change drastically if it has not changed already on your day to day work, right? I mean, I experience this on a day to day basis. Like some of the things that I used to take like sometimes weeks, now I can do within days, or like within a matter of hours even, right? So that acceleration is there significantly. There has to be like some human element that has to be
Human in the
in
middle.
human in the middle or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Like, so you need to take like these inputs, kind of curate it in a more presentable way. And like let's say like you're defining some kind of like a strategy, right? Yes, maybe an AI can produce like the entire strategy end to end, even with like a deliverable, but you still need someone to explain it to, like who you are delivering it to, right?
Right. Right.
And you're not going to do that just by reading something word for word. you need to really understand what's happening, right? So you might accelerate like in terms of what you produce or how you produce it, but like that last mile delivery still has to be done, which is why I think like I don't think it's necessarily going to go away, but the way of you do things, I could be misquoting this, like I think I read somewhere McKinsey has like a new AI Lily or something that basically acts as like a strategic consultant, right? Like so like consultants kind of have their own AI platform to kind of use for anything around like research, documentation, acceleration, but it doesn't necessarily take away the fact that like you do need to have like a consultant to kind of see through.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. I
just
think this is going to be a very interesting space to watch, like how this evolves. I don't think there's a lot of theories around it. I don't know if you saw there was a recent Apple research saying, there's a lot of hype around AI, like in terms of how much productivity you really get out of it. The more complexity that you use, like the productivity drastically drops in current AI models. There was a research published by them.
yeah.
Maybe it's because Apple doesn't have a good AI model. I don't know, but who knows?
How like of the AI related leaders are kind of framing this is like, you're not going to lose your job for AI. You're going to lose your job for someone who uses AI,
That's a very good point. I
right?
fully agree with
So
that.
yeah, so I think if you have not adapted, like if you are someone who uses Google, who uses like the internet for your day-to-day work and you haven't used AI for anything at all, like you're already behind.
Right.
I mean
That's true.
that's a given, right? Like because I mean I haven't met someone who has not talked about like ChatGPT that they're using for day-to-day work as an example, right? So I think that that adaptation needs to be there, like find ways to make things easier.
So if I'm someone either trying to switch my career into big consulting, or I want to start off my career in big consulting, any advice in terms of like how I should prepare myself?
I think you definitely need to be like a thought leader, is my opinion, right? Like because that's why when I started explaining how I kind of got into this, it's so there's two sides to this equation, right? Like where is like you need to kind of define the what, and then you need to also figure out how to do that, right? In a more traditional sense, like that what part had already been decided or figured out by someone what we are trying to do, and then typically from like a software development point of view, like you kind of come into picture to figure out like the how part. So I think like that strategic thinking, the commitment to work, there's like a lot of, I think, a lot of qualities that you need to cultivate, unless you already have it, right? Like before you get into that, because otherwise, for some reason, if you do get through like the hiring process, right, you will really start feeling that like you are not qualified to do what you are hired to do because of the caliber of people you'll be working on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, like bulk of the people who join these companies either come from like a really strong educational background or like a really strong work background or experience, right?
Yeah. Any regrets?
I don't think I have any regrets. I did come across certain things that I didn't like, right? Because whatever said and done, at the end of the day, this is a business, right? Everything revolves around money. Simple truth, right? So sometimes you want to do the right thing, but like you cannot do the right thing because it's not best for the business. So that is still there. Like yes, like we always want to do the right thing, but at the same time, sometimes you have to conform to certain things because you are working for a company at the end of the day, which is one of the reasons like why I decided to start my own thing,
You
so
have to
I
hit
can
your
do things.
revenue targets, right? So
Right.
yeah. So cool. I think so. But before we wrap up, any fun stories like working, traveling, meeting new people, like different cultures, like any memorable moments.
I've had the privilege to work on like some greenfield type of work, right? So you're starting from scratch, like from ideation to strategy to really implementing something and seeing it through. So one of the projects I work for, it's a consumer electronics client. I was the lead architect at the time of like going live. So it was like truly amazing to see how that product kind of came to light from day one, literally from from scratch. It was like an amazing moment, like when we did the final test and created, like, lit up everything. It was not open to the public yet, but internally, like, everything was kind of stitched together end to end. All the integrations were lit up, all the monitoring were up, and it was like a direct to consumer type of like a program. So us kind of placing that golden order or the golden record and seeing it through, like,
That's
go
cool.
through like these verticals, that was like an amazing feeling. And also, when we, like, a week later, when we went live, basically opened it up to the public, I had the privilege to open the floodgates, basically, where I went to the CDN, like the content delivery network, and open, like, basically remove the IP restrictions to open it up to the public. So yeah, that was like one of the most memorable moments, I would say. And it was like that whole program was a huge success too. So yeah, that's one of my go-to stories, like, around like key achievements.
I love that story. That's really cool that you got
Yeah.
to do that. So I think with that we should probably wrap up. And thank you all for tuning in. I think we unpack a lot today, what it takes to break into world of consulting, from understanding what it makes to join a big four or a top tier consulting firm, what kind of skills and mindset that you need to stand out and sustain and grow in a consulting firm, to how you spend more time traveling that in your own apartment, I guess. So remember, I think consulting is a really good way to advance your career. And if you have the right mindset and if you listen to our podcast and hustle, I think you'll get to the boardroom really fast, right? So with that, I think we'll wrap it up.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone.
Bye.